Welcome to today's webinar, where we will explore how the partnership between TrialKey and Biointelect is transforming the way clinical trials are designed and delivered. This industry-leading partnership sees Biointelect leveraging TrialKey's AI-powered platform to elevate their clinical trial services. By integrating advanced data-driven insights, success rate predictions, and strategic recommendations, Biointelect can optimize their trial designs, improve efficiencies, and enhance overall outcomes for their clients, driving success in clinical development. During today's session, we'll delve into how this partnership merges Biointellect's deep industry expertise with TrialKey's advanced analytics, helping sponsors navigate the complexities of clinical trials while balancing cost, efficiency, and patient outcomes. Jackie Wade, one of our panelists, is the Director of Clinical Affairs and Director Services at Biointelect, has over 30 years of experience in the pharmaceutical and biotech sectors across both clinical research and commercialization roles. She's worked across various therapeutic areas, including oncology, neuroscience, HIV, immunology, and infectious diseases for multinational corporations, small biotech, and contract research organizations. Jackie played a key role in establishing a phase 1 clinical trial unit and later managed phase 2 to 4 trials at Janssen and Pfizer. She also led successful PBS launches for therapies targeting prostate cancer and chronic leukemia. More recently, Jackie served as the project director at a CRO and director of business and clinical development at a biotech company. Since joining Biointelect in 2022, Jackie has applied her strategic and project management expertise to product development pathways and business support, helping clients accelerate clinical development programs, identify opportunities across the entire development pathway, and design plans for commercial success. From Opyl, we have Dr. Cao Xuan, who is a highly skilled healthcare professional, dentist, and business development specialist with expertise in B2B sales, medtech, and SaaS commercialization. With a background spanning pharmacy, dentistry, and public health, she combines clinical expertise in the healthcare and medical technology sectors. Minhthu holds a Doctor of Dental Medicine and Bachelor of Pharmacy from the University of Sydney, as well as a graduate certificate in public health from the University of Newcastle. Her clinical experience includes working as a dentist at the Pacific Smiles Group and a dental officer at the Royal Flying Doctor Service, where she provided essential healthcare services to rural and remote communities. As a territory manager, she worked across neurosurgical and CMF specialties, building key relationships and driving revenue growth. Now leading business development at Opyl and TrialKey, Minhthu helps provide AI-driven solutions alongside our team of medical experts. TrialKey's experts combine diverse experience in regulatory affairs, clinical research, pharmacogenetics, clinical trial design, biostatistics, clinical operations, patient cares, nutrition, and medical research. If you have any questions for our panelists, please add it to the chat, and we'll try to answer them at the end of the session. Otherwise, we will record the questions and the answers and send it across to you across social and emails as well. Okay. Jackie, how does Biointelect's broad expertise from preclinical drug development to commercialization help sponsors navigate the complexities of clinical development phase?
Yeah, thanks, Bernice, and it's great to be here today. Biointellect, for those who don't know a lot about us, we are a life science consulting company with full service CRO capabilities. And because of Biointellect's broad expertise, which really spans from preclinical drug development to commercialization, we can play a critical role in helping sponsors navigate the complexities of the clinical development phase. So there are a number of ways. Firstly, from strategic guidance across all of the stages. Our experience from drug development allows us to provide informed strategic advice that's tailored to each phase. So from preclinical right through to commercialization, the team ensure that sponsors understand the key milestones, any of the regulatory requirements and risk factors, allowing them to anticipate challenges before they arise. Because of our in-depth understanding of the regulatory requirements and our strong expertise in that area, we have a number of internal and experts externally that we consult with. We can really help sponsors ensure the clinical development programs meet the necessary regulatory standards. So we can navigate the landscape within Australia, but also regionally and globally, which actually is quite important when you think about where the sponsors want to do their larger phase studies, their phase 2 and their phase 3 studies. And all of that should be taken into consideration early so that there doesn't necessarily need to be a repeat of any of the clinical trials once the sponsor moves from Australia back to the US or to the EU. We have strength in clinical trial design. We have a team that can help with trial protocols, endpoint selection, statistical modelling is something that we also help with. And through that, we actually then try to improve data collection and trial efficiency and ultimately try and speed up the clinical development timeline. We can also look at the early stage in the preclinical and actually assess what is going on from the preclinical development plan and identify any risks that may slow down the ultimate development and translation into the clinic. And ultimately, since we have the commercialization expertise, we do like to start the conversations early with the sponsors around what their long-term plans are and how they would like to implement or hand over their product, whether it is an exit to a large pharma company or whether they actually want to continue the development of the drug all the way through to commercialization themselves. We can assist then with the support that's needed when it comes to the late phase clinical trials and the launch of the product. And I suppose overall, because of all of these different areas of expertise, we really like to take a multidisciplinary approach. So regulatory affairs, clinical operations, market access and commercialization are all things that we can work together and really foster that seamless collaboration between the teams. And we then integrate ourselves into the sponsors organisation and really know and focus on what they are trying to achieve at the end of the day.
Thank you, Jackie. minhthu, how can TrialKey's AI-powered tools optimize trial design to balance cost, efficiency, and patient outcomes?
Thanks, Bernice. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. So just a very quick introduction on what TrialKey is. It's an AI agent, and essentially what we can do is we can simulate and design and optimize clinical trial protocols. So when we have a clinical trial protocol, our AI bot will scan the protocol for 1,300 variables in each protocol, and it does this by leveraging machine learning algorithms. So the two main ones that it leverages, one of them is called XGBoost. And what this does is it implements gradient boosted decision trees. And it's very effective for what we call structured data or tabular data, so data that might be found in a table. And we also use something called random forests. And the reason it's called random forests is it combines lots of decision trees to create a forest. And what this is used for is both classification and regression problems in code types R and Python. So classification and regression, what they are, they're two primary tasks used in supervised machine learning. And the key difference is in the output itself. So classification deals with discrete outcomes, so yes, no, or categories. And regression handles continuous values, so something like price or temperature. So once the agent scans for all these 1,300 variables, what it will do is it will simulate the trial 100,000 times and adjust each variable a little bit each time. So it might take the trial that currently has an enrolment of 50 patients, it'll increase it to 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, and then decrease the number of patients by 40, 30, 20, and it'll have a look at how each variable affects the probability of success. It will also take the trial, put it in another country, add some sites in different countries. It will change the primary and secondary endpoints. It'll change the duration of the trial, any of these variables, and it'll see the marginal impact of each variable. So our algorithm is based on a training data set. And in that data set, it is proprietary. It took our data scientists about 3 years to collect all the information, and it has about 520,000 clinical trials within it. So what it's doing is it's looking at what's been done really well historically and copying what's been done well and finding any gaps in the current clinical trial protocol. In terms of balancing cost, efficiency, and patient outcomes, we all know that patient recruitment, site selection, site numbers, they're all very expensive. We also know that not all sites are made equal. Some might be more experienced in certain phases and in certain disease states. Some might have principal investigators who are very knowledgeable in certain conditions. What TrialKey does is it allocates a percentile score, a ranking score for each site to reflect each site's experience and success in trials in a certain phase and in a certain indication of interest. So in terms of recruiting patients, we will optimize enrolment numbers. So it will look for all of the studies in that phase, in that disease state, and it can also drill down to a particular mechanism of action as well. And we can make it as bespoke as possible if we're comparing it only to trials in the last 1 year, in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years. We can get all of that data and simulate each of those trials 100,000 times. And what we end up doing is we can plot a graph for each clinical trial and each trial's contribution in terms of its enrollment to its probability of success. And what we generally see is a logarithmic type function where there's a big increase up to a certain enrollment number, and then after that it's just a plateau for the contribution to probability of success. So it helps us find the perfect number where there's adequate power, but also we're not overspending on number of patients.
Thank you. Jackie, what are Biointelect's key considerations when designing clinical trials to ensure alignment with both short-term and long-term project goals?
Yeah, thanks, Bernice. I actually feel that what I'm about to say will build on what Minthu's actually just talked about, especially in relation to being cost effective, about targeting the right number of patients and doing it such that you are maximizing the opportunity and actually minimizing the risks that come with designing clinical trials. So as I mentioned earlier, the first thing that we really like to do when we meet with our sponsors is truly understand what is going on, what their plans are, such that we can have a discussion with the end in mind for what that sponsor is trying to achieve. And by working backwards, we can then try and understand what it is that's important and how we can really manage the clinical trial design such that we have the regulatory success, meet the objectives, and optimize the development time. So there's a number of key factors that I'm going to touch on. Some of them aren't really a surprise, but I think that it's important that we go through them just for completion so that it's clear that there is a lot of thinking that is done up front in supporting our sponsors in the clinical development plan. So the first is obviously trial design and objectives. And we really work with the sponsors to ensure that the trial design addresses the immediate milestones, obviously safety, proof of concept, or even early efficacy signals. And what we are really trying to do there is select the appropriate endpoints, the right patient population, and really evaluating the feasible and measurable outcomes. And that is something, obviously, we work together with TrialKey on because it's an important part to try and ensure that we are giving the right advice up front. But there's other things as well. Regulatory alignment comes into play. We want to obviously ensure that the clinical trial complies with the local regulatory requirements for our Australian HREC requirements and site governance needs, but there's obviously the longer term focus. So we keep in mind the future regulatory submissions, whether it's for the US, where there might be an IND that's planned for their phase 2 or phase 3 studies, and any other global regulatory applications. And then we also then want to make sure that there's a smoother pathway to approval in the longer term and potential discussions around post-approval commitments. So we're always thinking about these things up front so that we actually can ensure that the trials are designed appropriately. we definitely leverage our internal and our external experts to guide us in this area. So when it comes to patient population and inclusion-exclusion criteria, again, this is something that we want to make sure that the participants can be found within the Australian environment. Does Australia have a large enough patient population to recruit for the indication in question? That can be done via site feasibility questionnaires, desktop research, but TrialKey also comes in at this stage to help out, in particular in guiding perhaps experiences with other trials and inclusion-exclusion criteria, and making sure we're not being overly restrictive in the type of participant we want to try and recruit. And then the other consideration with patient population is ultimately the standard of care in Australia, and is it matching or is it similar to other countries where the product will be registered? And if the answer to that is no, what are the questions that we have to address such that the early trials can collect the safety data while then ultimately thinking about the longer term trial design and patient populations for the later phase trials. We've mentioned on a couple of occasions trial timelines and budget. That's always something that's taken into consideration. Risk management and data quality is the other thing that I think is really important. So we'll always work to anticipate risks related to patient recruitment, retention, protocol deviations, and what are the risks around that could potentially even delay a trial. Our risk management strategies ensure that the trial runs smoothly within the expected timeframes. And really longer term, we want to consider any new regulatory requirements or shifts in the competitive landscape that might actually impact what we're designing or recommending for clinical trials today. And it's a real balancing act of all these things to try and have the ideal clinical trial. But what we are really trying to do then is make sure that we're doing the best and making the short-term clinical trial decisions for the longer term strategic outcomes.
Thank you, Jackie. I'd like to open this question out to both of you. How can inclusion and exclusion criteria be refined to balance recruitment feasibility and scientific integrity?
Yeah, I might go first if that's all right, Minhthu. So really in refining inclusion and exclusion criteria requires careful consideration of the trial's scientific objectives and the practical realities of actually recruiting these patients. So by focusing on selecting patients who will provide meaningful data while managing the feasibility of recruitment, I think it's important we ensure that the trial is both effective and efficient. So we want to have well-defined criteria, although there does need to be some flexibility. We need to have subgroup analysis potentially that might be able to help us in managing trial expectations. I think the exclusion criteria have to be really nice and clear, and ongoing safety monitoring is going to be important. So consultation early with your medical monitor, your local medical monitor, and even the medical team at the sponsor is going to be important. And at the end of the day, really the primary focus is on generating that valid, reliable, meaningful results, but it's how you get to that. So maybe, Minhthu, can you give us a little bit of insight on how you manage that from a TrialKey perspective?
Yeah. So as we mentioned before, we look at current and historical clinical trials in a phase, condition, mechanism of action in a certain period of time. And what we do is we identify the most relevant variables within the inclusion and exclusion criteria that's going to affect that overall probability of success of that clinical trial meeting its primary endpoints. So these might be age, gender, comorbidities. We'll look at disease levels, so how far the disease has progressed or how long the patient has had the disease for, and prior treatments as well. And we'll look for whatever is going to impact the study outcomes. And by simulating these different scenarios, TrialKey ensures that the criteria is not too broad. which risks non-representative data, and it's not too narrow, which limits enrolment. And we've had some studies and some that we've worked with Biointellect as well, so I'll let Jackie talk a little bit more about that, where the draft protocol outlined a lot of inclusion-exclusion criteria, and the algorithm found that it to be too exclusive, and it did significantly impact the overall probability of success. So not only do we look at the overall number, so the quantitative amount of criteria, but we also look at the qualitative amount. So TrialKey will also recommend the best inclusion and exclusion criteria for that trial to be successful. In terms of scientific integrity, TrialKey, we've got a team of 6 expert researchers. They have quite a vast amount of experience in different fields of research as well, and they play a really crucial role in evaluating the platform's output. So every single recommendation will undergo meticulous review by the team, and what they'll do is they'll cross-reference all of the outputs from TrialKey and find up-to-date scientific studies that will back it up, so it's authoritative, and then there's scientific integrity as well. And this allows the platform to not only be innovative, but also deeply rooted in reliability and credibility.
Yeah, so I might build on one of the examples that Minhthu just mentioned. It's actually only in the last couple of weeks that we've been working on assessing this particular trial. It's quite a complex trial in an area of unmet need. And once TrialKey did the analysis, we actually found that the protocol from the sponsor had over twice as many patient selection criteria as other trials, which, when you think about it from an experienced clinical research perspective, that actually opens up a lot of risk when it comes to trying to find those particular patients. So you're going to have a high number of pre-screening failures and screening failures if you've got so many inclusion-exclusion criteria that you might be restricting it to not being even able to achieve the sample size that the study was targeting. So I think it's really important that you can use these tools effectively to go back and advise your sponsors early about what some of those risks might be, what the analysis is telling us, such that we can really limit the number of pre-screening and screening failures, that we can actually make recruitment more efficient, which obviously then decreases recruitment delays, decreases time spent finding the patients by the sites, and also then the time spent actually running the clinical trial itself.
Thank you both. Building on that, Minhthu, how can TrialKey's predictive modeling improve patient recruitment and reduce the risk of under-enrollment?
So we use our current active and historical data, but what we do is we will rank clinical trial sites, and we'll look at their overall performance in terms of recruitment and trial successes that they've done in the past, and we'll recommend sites for each clinical trial based on this. So if you're looking at only trials in Australia, we'll find the best sites for that indication, for that phase. As we all know, not all sites are made equal, so some things they can vary in investigator experience, whether that's with established networks, trust, credibility, retention strategies, patient demographics of that site and where it is, infrastructure, so if they've got specialized equipment or facilities per patient as well, geographic location, so we spoke about before, standard of care, regulatory requirements, cultural considerations, operational efficiency, so what are the processes, what are the SOPs at each site. And something that's quite useful is our algorithm also analyzes for competing trials with similar inclusion and exclusion criteria. And what this does is it detects potential competition for the same patient pool at those sites. So that way we can flag any high-risk locations up front and optimize site selection to avoid under-enrollment. So the algorithm really does mitigate the risk of under-recruitment by assessing eligibility criteria. And like I said before, not only the number of criteria, but the criteria itself. And this way it optimizes site numbers, enrollment numbers, and it also factors in dropout rate as well.
Thank you. Jackie, what are the most significant risks sponsors face during clinical trials, and how can they be mitigated during that planning phase?
Yeah, so obviously running or conducting clinical trials in itself is a risk, and sponsors are and investors are looking for ways to always reduce those risks. And I think if you can work together with the sponsors very early on in the early phase or in the early stages of trial design, you're really going to mitigate a lot of those risks and give the sponsors and the investors reassurance that the trial will be completed on time and on budget. So there's obviously regulatory and compliance risks that we've already mentioned. So from our perspective, early engagement with regulatory experts and continuous monitoring of the regulatory landscape is really, really important. And with the team at Biointelect, we work very closely to introduce our regulatory team to the sponsor early so that those discussions can kick off and we can give any support that may come up during the clinical development phase. When it comes to patient recruitment and retention, there's obviously always risk. And TrialKey, working with TrialKey, we try and reduce that risk in the way that we, identify the inclusion-exclusion criteria. But in some cases, there does need to be a comprehensive recruitment strategy, especially for those more complex, high-risk studies that do come across our desk. And we've also mentioned site selection. So selection of sites with experience in recruiting for similar trials and ensuring that they are adequately resourced is really, really important at that early stage. But then it's not just about selecting the site and making sure they've got the patients and getting the patients enrolled. It's then longer term about the retention plan. And how do you, especially over a longer term trial, say, for example, we have a trial at the moment, which is a phase 2 study where we're thinking about the longer term patient engagement so that there is that momentum that's maintained and the patient maintains interest over the longer period. So there might be things like educational materials, clear communication. Are there any trial updates? There are risks, obviously, with data integrity and data control. And as a CRO, we've got things in place to try and mitigate that, especially in relation to our data management plan. That's really important to have that comprehensive data management strategy up front. We have all the plans around monitoring, and obviously the training of our staff and the site staff is also really important. That then leads into managing protocol deviations and non-compliance and having all the plans in place to make sure that is managed effectively, and whenever possible using electronic monitoring tools to make sure that we can become aware of any protocol deviations or non-compliance as quickly as we possibly can. You've obviously got safety and adverse event risks that come into play, but again, the safety monitoring plan and risk management plan are all part of the setup and something that any CRO would be doing at the start of the study. And then finally, we think about what about budget overruns and potential delays. So we really are comfortable having realistic budgeting and contingency planning conversations up front with our vendors and our sponsors, and making sure that we establish a realistic budget, that we're working closely with our vendors and the sites to ensure that there is contingencies built into that as well. So by addressing all of those risks up front and having proactive conversations, I really think that you can mitigate a lot of these risks to ensure that the sponsor and any investors are actually getting what they want out of the clinical development program.
Thank you for that. Minhthu, what benefits can sponsors gain from combining AI-driven insights with operational expertise?
So our insights provide valuable information from predictive analyses, and this might be information that might have been missed, just small nuances within the data. And these insights allow for our CROs to provide top-level feasibility calculations that are backed by data for sponsors in their pitch. So some of these might be patient numbers, site numbers, the duration of the trial itself, the best way to diagnose these patients. And this information often leads to improved outcomes, but also cost savings. So what these insights include is a success distribution graph. So what we'll say is, right now, the protocol you've given us, we have simulated this 100,000 times, and the probability of success of it meeting completion, efficacy outcomes, whatever the primary outcomes may be, is right now 50%, and you're in the 60th percentile. With these key TrialKey recommendations, add sites here, take away a site here, add this many patients here, change the duration, add 5 touch points at these time points here, will increase the probability of success up to 70%, and we can get you into the 90th percentile of trials. So it gives a before and after of how we can adjust that trial to make it more successful. And that information is for that CRO to go and pitch to the sponsor. And we also provide a competitive analysis. And what this is, we will use AI to find the 40 or 50 closest trials running at the moment to the trial in question. And what we'll do is we'll simulate each one of those trials as well and give them a probability of success score. And then we'll map it out on a timeline. So then the CRO that we're working with and the sponsor that they're working with can see what's it look like out there in terms of the competitive landscape? When are these other trials going to start and finish? And what's their probability of success compared to our probability of success? And it's just a great tool for benchmarking. And we'll also provide a technology breakdown. So we'll say right now in this space, these are the technology classes that are being used in this clinical trial space, in this phase and in this condition. And as a group, what's their probability of success? And we will also do that for sponsors as well. So who's working in the mRNA space right now? How much research is this company doing in it? And we'll also do a one-by-one variable breakdown. So for any variable that will contribute to the overall probability of success by more than 0.5%, we'll create what we call a SHAP chart, which plots out each clinical trial in that phase and condition in that variable, just looking at the marginal impact of that variable. And we'll say, this is the optimal range that we recommend. This is the range that you're in right now. And it just gives them a good idea of how to optimize that clinical trial to meet its primary endpoints.
I'd like to open the question up to both of you. How does the integration of advanced analytics and hands-on trial management improve the probability of success for complex trials?
I can start. So what we do is we help address challenges more comprehensively and efficiently. So some aspects that we work together in, advanced analytics, they provide really deep insights into trial design, patient recruitment, treatment efficacy. And they do this by analyzing vast data sets that a human otherwise couldn't do. And what this allows us to do is identify trends, risks, opportunities that otherwise would have been missed. So, obviously what TrialKey does, we optimize trial design. We do this with predictive modeling, simulation, advanced analytics, and it really refines the trial protocols and it makes sure that they're scientifically sound and practical. And on the other hand, we have hands-on trial management, which will use this data to implement designs that are achievable and rigorous as well. And we've spoken a lot about recruitment. It's probably one of the key factors in how a trial is going to succeed or not. And advanced analytics can help us identify the right patient populations and match specific trial criteria, which improves recruitment efficiency. Combined with hands-on management, these strategies can be tailored and adapted to meet real-time challenges. And, hands-on management itself, it means that we'll be able to ensure timely interventions, prevent delays, and stop errors from escalating. And hands-on management is what really ensures that trials will adhere to regulatory and ethical standards as well.
Yeah, and I might actually add a couple from a CRO perspective that come to mind. I think optimized resource allocation is really useful when you've got access to the advanced analytics. So tools can actually look at resource usage across the patients, across clinical site performance, across investigator engagement, and very early on identify where perhaps resources are being underutilized or misallocated, or suggest that adjustments may be made to resource distribution. So a really good example is that advanced analytics can actually pinpoint sites that are not performing as well as they could be. And in that way, then, we can actually, as the CRO, support our CPMs and our CRAs to work with the sites to make adjustments in the way that perhaps patients are being recruited, or other resources aren't being maximized in the way that they could be. So I think there is a real place in the ability to support with the right sort of resources when it comes to perhaps underperforming sites. The other area I think is so important, and we've talked about it quite a lot, is around risk mitigation and real-time monitoring. So real-time data analytics actually can support any of the key outcomes that you're trying to measure throughout the trial. It can track patient safety signals, enrolment progress, protocol compliance, even adverse events in real time. And this sort of ongoing monitoring really does enable early detection of any potential issues that could delay or even derail the trial. So the clinical project managers and the CRAs can actually act again quite quickly to manage any of these risks. I think even the medical monitors, if there's a safety signal that's detected, can really talk quite quickly with the sponsor about the design of the trial protocol, and also then decide whether perhaps there's more frequent monitoring required, or there needs to be an assessment on the enrolment criteria. So there's lots of different ways. And all of this then obviously leads to faster decision making and issue resolution, which is what we all really want. We want to be able to look for trends, have these reports come to us in real time, and especially with complex trials where there are huge amounts of data, it's really important that we can have these tools and give us these reports in real time to really support the site staff, but also to support the overarching sponsor team in making quick decisions on what might be coming out as far as the trial data goes.
I'd like to open this up to both of you again. What trends in trial technology are reshaping the way clinical trials are designed and executed?
I might start this one. So we're finding that at each stage of clinical development, AI has really stepped up to help improve efficiency and success. You know, when we look at even really early on in the research and discovery phase, we can see that large language models are being used to help summarize huge data sets and to accelerate literature reviews. It's taking all that really tedious and laborious work and making it a lot faster and a lot more efficient. You know, then we move into the clinical development stage, and companies like TrialKey are unlocking real-world evidence and helping predict optimized clinical trials. In patient recruitment, in the recruitment itself, I recently spoke to Strongroom AI. They've got this product called Strong Pro. And what it does is it uses an algorithm to scan pharmacy databases to identify potential clinical trial candidates. Coming from a pharmacy background, pharmacies are super accessible. They're very convenient for patients. They maintain a huge, rich patient data information as well. And they're often a patient's most regular and first point of contact. You know, we're also seeing mining being used in electronic health records, medical imaging, and also omics data to improve patient selection and optimize a drug's effectiveness. So all of these technologies aim to reduce population heterogeneity to enrich prognostics. So by selecting the right patients that are going to have measurable clinical endpoints and to enrich predictions as well. So identifying patients that are most likely to respond to treatment. So, you know, what else we're seeing that's huge is AI in the EDC space. So it's going to reduce human error. It's going to create predictive analyses in real time as well. So these algorithms, they can help with data collection, with digitizing standard clinical assessments and facilitating data sharing. And now that we've got wearable technology, so I'm wearing my smart ring right now, you know, AI means that you can monitor patients and provide real-time insights, and all of that human error is taken out. And it can also help, you know, predict dropout risks and improve patient engagement and retention. I'll pass it over to Jackie.
Yeah, well, I think TrialKey is an excellent example of the predictive analytics for trial design and execution, and minhthu has explained that really nicely. There are a number of other AI tools that are being used out there. C-Trials and Clini Digest are another couple that actually play in the same space. So, you know, this is an expanding area very quickly, and organizations like TrialKey can really assist when it comes to that predictive analytics for trial design and execution. Minthu's also talked about patient recruitment and retention. I think it's interesting that predictive algorithms can really start to identify patients who are likely to drop out, even though they might be early in the phase of the clinical trial, or, you know, very early as part of the entire trial period. But what it does then mean is that you can really intervene as quickly as possible to make sure there are things that can be mitigated, like perhaps medication non-adherence. I think that's probably one of the key things that we are always worried about, especially when once you move into your efficacy studies, your late phase 2, phase 3 studies. And I mentioned before about patient engagement, especially for longer term trials. I think, you know, the use of virtual assistants and chatbots really have the potential to improve patient engagement and even answer questions throughout the trial to enhance the overall experience for the participants. Now, obviously, there's a little bit more work that has to happen up front, because a lot of those virtual assistants and chatbots answers would have to go through the ethics committee approval process. But being organised early, I think, is another way of mitigating that risk of patient dropouts and maintaining the overall patient engagement. There's also data quality management that comes into this. So there are AI-powered tools. There's one called SAMA's SDQ that can clean and validate data from thousands of patients in days rather than months, and that is obviously a huge advantage. We all know that there are other EDCs out there that are now adding advanced analytics as part of their package. There's an organization in the US called Prevail. I was given a demonstration about what they are offering as part of their EDC. They are actually specializing in oncology clinical trials. And while a clinical trial is being conducted and the data is being collected on that particular clinical trial, in the background, there's a whole heap of analytics that's happening, comparing the current clinical trial to what might actually be happening from previous studies and previous experience. So it's just an amazing way that you can actually get some real-time feedback in what's happening in the clinical trial space. And then the other thing, obviously, it'd be remiss of me not to talk about decentralized trial models and the way that digital and virtual trial technologies are being used to run decentralized trials now. And obviously with Australia and its vast geographic spread of patients or participants, we actually do have an opportunity to think a lot more about how we can actually maximize decentralized trials. And the final thing that I actually wanted to talk about, which I found fascinating, was this thing called digital twin technology. So there's a company, for example, called Unlearn that can create digital twins of trial participants using advanced modeling to try and simulate patient outcomes. And what that could potentially mean is that we don't necessarily need to have as many placebo-controlled trials anymore. It's only early on in its evolution, but something that I really think we should be watching out for at the end of the day. And through all of these things that I've mentioned, we then need to come back to integrated approaches. So we have to think about hybrid AI and statistical models, and we haven't even touched really on quantum computing, and that's something that I am not an expert in. I want to say that up front, but I just think that there is a lot that's happening in quantum machine learning approaches at the moment, and that may change everything again when it comes to trial simulation, site selection. So I think we're only at the cusp of what AI can do, but there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, definitely. Jackie put up a lot of really great examples. Next question. Jackie, how can predictive analytics and global partnerships like ours address reservations about adopting AI and using CROs while still demonstrating the value in tackling unmet medical needs?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to collaborate and to start the conversation early. I think that would be my main message, because there is so much power within the databases that we have, and so many ways that we can leverage the knowledge that's being collected right now for the good of designing and mitigating risk when it comes to clinical trials.
Yeah. And last question. How does Biointellect's clinical trial expertise help sponsors navigate the complexities of aligning trials with global regulatory requirements? I think you did touch on this a bit earlier before, but if there's anything else you wanted to add on.
I might just finish off by highlighting the fact that the clinical trial expertise is only one part of what Biointellect has to offer any sponsor, because as I've said before, the complexities of drug development aren't just within the clinical phase. It goes right from preclinical through to commercialization. And we are always at Biointellect trying to stay one step ahead of what is happening within the global environment. And in particular, at the moment, you can imagine the global regulatory environment is having, some changes that are occurring. So what we at Biointellect are really trying to do is integrate that clinical trial expertise into something broader, such that the sponsors have a truly positive experience where they feel comfortable and confident in ensuring that their product is going to be a focus and that they're going to get the expert advice that's needed to become successful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us for today's session. If you have any questions, please put it into the chat. I do see we have one question addressed to you, Jackie, from Michael.
Yep.
What is the key differentiator between Biointellect and other Australian CROs for an international sponsor?
Yeah, sure. I actually think I just answered some of it, and it is the actual depth and breadth of expertise that Biointellect does have. The other thing that we have worked really closely with is the broad number of strategic partnerships that we have to be able to address really quickly what the challenges are within either a clinical development program or the overarching challenges that a sponsor might be experiencing when it comes to trying and getting their innovation to market as quickly as possible. So we're in the very unique and lucky position that we have a broad key stakeholder group that we can consult on across Australia and also globally that can support and give that expertise and try and assist in whatever way we possibly can. So it's important that we take a more strategic approach and that we are coming to the table with the broad experience that we can then support with any challenge that is put to us.
Thank you. Cecil, I do see that you have a question. I have consulted with minhthu, and I would like to address that to you directly via email to ensure that we have the entirety of the information that you are looking for.
Yeah, because it touches on our proprietary data set. So we'll find out the information that we can divulge from our data scientists, and then we'll respond to you privately.
Yeah, I think that if anyone has any further questions, if you'd like to send it to me via email or add it into the comment section of the event, I can send it across to either minhthu or Jackie, and then they can email you directly. And for any other questions that aren't private, we're welcome to post that onto our socials as well. So a recording of today's webinar will be sent to everyone who has registered. But thank you all for joining us here today. And I hope you found it quite insightful. And thank you to our 2 panelists as well. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jackie. Thanks, Bernice. Bye.